We knew that significant changes may be coming for the Miami Dolphins this offseason, and day one of the legal tampering period brought exactly that.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting. You can find our shows on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Tip of the cap to our everydayers, because it is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. We don't just say it, we live it. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Let's start with this disclaimer first. Yesterday was not fun. The Dolphins bid farewell to a number of well-regarded talents that were drafted into this organization several years ago, to the tune of significant dollars. And depending on where you look, you'll find everything from the blackest Monday the Dolphins have ever experienced to an organization with no direction. And these are not Joe bunch of numbers on X.com either. These are the beat reporters of this football team. Let's start with the facts. The Dolphins are worse at right guard and at defensive tackle today than they were yesterday, 24 hours ago. It's 5 a.m. I'm recording. Was going to get an early jump for a news cycle and try to get it up without getting blitzed by any new signings announced or new signings for other teams of Dolphins players announced. So we're up to date. The Dolphins lost Christian Wilkins for a 4-year, $110 million contract for the Las Vegas Raiders. It's an average of $27.5 million per season. The Dolphins lost Robert Hunt on a 5-year, $100 million contract to the Carolina Panthers. Andrew Van Ginkel signed a 2-year, $20 million contract with the Minnesota Vikings. And Brandon Jones signed a 3-year, $20 million contract, safety, with the Denver Broncos. It's a lot to digest. We heard all about yesterday how the Dolphins lost a starting player every hour for the first 4 hours of free agency. It's like, I guess my question is, the fact is, you're worse with your third edge rusher today. Now, we'll see what happens. If they sign Jadeveon Clowney, I think you've got a pretty good argument of having a better third pass rusher, or Josh Uche. Like, there's moves that they can make. You're not up you-know-what creek without a paddle as far as a third pass rusher. But it's still a sentimental player in Andrew Van Ginkel. You're worse at defensive tackle, and you're probably going to need 2 players to replace Christian Wilkins with the volume of snaps that he takes. And you're worse at right guard. There's no question. And it's not fun. And it's super exciting for Christian Wilkins, and it's super exciting for Robert Hunt. Especially like Robert Hunt. You know Robert Hunt's background. If you're not familiar, Google Robert Hunt's background and the kind of childhood he had and the hardships his family experienced. And for him to sign a $20 million a year contract to go play in Carolina, it's an awesome opportunity for Rob Hunt. It's the business side of the game that stinks. And I'll give Omar Kelly credit for this. We've had a number of conversations about the salary cap outlook for Miami. And one of the things that he got right was that this player market, it was robust. And I never in a million years would have guessed Robert Hunt would be signing for $20 million per. I had a sneaking suspicion Christian Wilkins was going to get 26. I never in a million years would have guessed he was going to get 27.5 from the Raiders. Those are monster numbers. And that's the part of me where if you made proactive offers to both guys, and I know for a fact, we know for a fact that Dolphins did. The Dolphins offered Robert Hunt at some point in the last year a quote-unquote fair market deal but still probably from a team-friendly perspective because you read between the leaves. The offer that Zach Sealer accepted, we say, oh, it's a good deal for Miami. The offer that Austin Jackson accepted, he said, hey, it's a good deal for Miami. If they've been trying to get out ahead of those, they put out what they think the price is. And if the player bites, then you get the deal done. But if I told you in December, Christian Wilkins, it's going to cost you $27.5 million per to sign him, what would your reaction have been? You need to pay him $27.5 million or he's going to leave. Robert Hunt, if I told you in December, it's going to be $20 million per season to sign Robert Hunt, $100 million contract to retain his services. Are you in or you out? Well, what would your response have been? But because it happens on free agency and all these things happen in rapid succession, it's the worst day in the history of the Dolphins, or the blackest Monday. So somebody actually wrote that story, the blackest Monday in the history of the Dolphins, because Christian Wilkins got $27.5 million per, and Robert Hunt got 20, and Andrew Van Ginkel got 2 for 10, or 2 for 10 apiece. Nobody counted on Brandon Jones being back, but he's a part of the losses of this catastrophic day. The writing was on the wall. So my question is, what happened differently that if you've been paying attention or you've followed this program? I just put together an entire mock offseason for you guys, and 3 of these 4 guys that were lost weren't on the blueprint. And Connor Williams wasn't on the blueprint either. He remains unsigned. The one that surprised me was Andrew Van Ginkel. Sounded like that market got hot late. And look, when his wife took to Twitter and thanked Dolphins fans, and the first thing she talked about is looking forward to going back to the Midwest and chanting Skull again. Okay. Awesome. I'll carry great memories of Andrew Van Ginkel and his time with Miami. Van Ginkel did some really nice stuff for this community as well. I'm wearing the Robert Hunt Give Him 6 sweatshirt from the Baltimore game. I'll always have great memories of the 5 years that Christian Wilkins spent here. But I wasn't blindsided by Christian Wilkins getting the bag and Robert Hunt getting the bag. I was blindsided by the market being what the market was for both team or both players. I was blindsided by the guard market being one of the most robust markets out there. But it was largely an expected turn of events that still managed to become the worst thing that's ever happened. And the NFL equivalent of the Titanic sinking is what it was made out to be. Which is, I guess, where I'm sitting here watching this all unfold. I'm like, we kind of knew what was coming, right? Apparently not. Well, apparently we did. But the Dolphins didn't sit on their hands all day. They signed several players, which we're going to discuss next here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you stick with us. Say goodbye to busted brackets, because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on the big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with your first $5 bet. Winning, it's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. So the Dolphins did, as we said, get into the action after the crazy wave was over. The first wave of free agency, the legal tampering period, and players not signing but agreeing to terms. The technicality of it, they can't sign until 4:00 tomorrow on Wednesday. The Dolphins made some maneuvers. The Dolphins got some stuff done. They also got salary cap compliance, so we can collectively exhale and relax in that regard. The Dolphins restructured several contracts, the big one being Jalen Ramsey, and created almost $20 million in cap space by restructuring Jalen Ramsey. From the sounds of it, they added a void year to the back end of that contract. They converted his $11 million roster bonus, which was due in a few days, and the entirety of his salary, base salary, into a new bonus, added a void year on the back end of it, and spread that figure out across 5 seasons. Ramsey, of course, is under contract for this year and next year. I guess they spread it out against 4 seasons because it's now 2 dummy void years on the back end of the deal, I think. Either way, they added a void year to the back end of the deal, which I think makes him an extension candidate next offseason when he has 1 year left and then like the big cap hit of dead money for the following season, which if you extend the player, it doesn't accelerate all into 1 year. It can kind of just stay prorated out. And it's lesser cap hits if you keep the player under contract. They also restructured Zach Sealer and Durham Smythe. They put themselves in a place of having they also finalized whatever reworking of Teron Armstead's contract was reported. And I'm fascinated to find out what the details are of that. We don't have it right now. But what we also do have is 3 new players that are members of the Miami Dolphins after agreeing to terms yesterday. The big hitter was Jordyn Brooks, the linebacker, former first-round linebacker of the Seattle Seahawks. And I had a chance to watch Jordyn Brooks in the build-up, as I did with over 200 other free agents to be. And here's what I would say about Jordyn Brooks. I classify him as an adequate level starter, same as Jerome Baker. He's in the same tier of talent as Jerome Baker with a little bit of a different set of skills. He's a tackling machine. He's more dynamic at this stage of his career than what Jerome Baker is in my mind. He's a better coverage player. If you listen to Pro Football Focus, they're going to tell you his coverage ability stinks. And here's what I tell you about Jordyn Brooks. There's some parallels to what Tremaine Edmunds was for the Buffalo Bills. Not necessarily the same like physical attributes, but Tremaine Edmunds in Buffalo had such a unique role within that defense because of his length and athleticism. And the things that they then asked him to do were the kinds of things that you don't ask 90% of linebackers in the NFL to do, because it's insane to have the expectation that they can do it. And Tremaine Edmunds could do it. And the byproduct of that was it changed the math all around the field for zone spacing and middle of field assignments and so on and so forth. Jordyn Brooks is kind of the same way in the vertical athleticism that he has to carry vertical speed from 3 or to cut crossers and, play zone coverage and find crossing routes and match them from the other side of the field in the middle of the field. There's a lot of range that Miami, quite frankly, did not have in zone coverage in the middle of the field. And there's this fascinating trend across the league where you're seeing kind of this devaluation of the safety position, right? You had Kevin Byard was cut, Quandre Diggs was cut, Justin Simmons was cut. Then you have like Deshaun Elliott, Deshaun Gibson, and Jordan Fuller, and John Johnson, and Julian Blackman, and Darnell Savage, and Jordan Whitehead, and Cam Curl, and Aloy Gilman, and Geno Stone are out there. And Jordan Poyer's cut, and Eddie Jackson's cut, and Rayshawn Jenkins is cut. Like, you guys get the point. And it's largely a position that does not have high-end economics as far as positional value and what gets paid. And some of that is because the trends across the league are the too high safeties to limit explosive plays. So you're rendering some of the proximity to line of scrimmage and playmaking ability of those players kind of gets mitigated. And the trickle-down effect of that is, okay, well, who are the guys that then do get a little bit closer and can help bridge that gap and make plays along the line of scrimmage, but then also have some coverage ability in the middle of the field and help fill that void when you're playing with a high roof? It's the linebackers. the next level up then has the players that have to carry the burden of what the diverse safeties are capable of doing if everybody's going to sit in two high shells and limit explosive plays. So I don't think it's a coincidence that you saw Frankie Louvu from the Panthers go for $12 million a year to the Washington Commanders. Or I don't think it's a coincidence that you saw Azeez Al-Shaair, who I thought was a good Dolphins candidate, signed with the Texans for 11.5 per season, reuniting with D'Amico Ryans. Like that's a big contract. Like Patrick Queen's still out there. Jordyn Brooks signs for 3 for a maximum of 30. It's a little bit closer to 9, technically, I think is the true value with incentives, I believe, that play it up to $30 million per. Kenneth Murray, not a good player, signed for 2 years, 18 to replace Al-Shaair in Tennessee yesterday, or agreed to terms. It's going to get me again before the end of the show, I promise. These are all agreed to terms. They're not signed yet. So I think that's a really interesting, like there were only 6 linebackers that were getting $10+ million AAV on their current contracts coming into this. You had 3 in the free agency cycle. And you're going to get another one with Patrick Queen. It's a really interesting dynamic. But this addition for Miami is, especially when you pair it with the other linebacker addition of Anthony Walker, you could see the vision for Miami and the understanding of effective middle of the field coverage and getting better performance there in complementary skills. Walker, previously with the Cleveland Browns, is a little bit of a thumper type linebacker. Instincts are really good. Is probably going to be a cheap contract. He comes to Miami after having played, I think, in 12 games last season. Injuries have kind of been a thing, which is the Walker contract comes first, and you're like, man, are we really just going to put our chips in the basket with a guy who's had injuries the last couple of years? But he's a little bit more of a role-specific player now with the Jordyn Brooks pairing to go with it, along with David Long. And I think you get really excited about that linebacker core with the understanding that maybe your and the Ravens defense is like this too. They have a number of guys that are big body guys that occupy space and let linebackers run free, like Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen. And I think Jordyn Brooks and David Long, if you can find the bodies to be occupiers in the A-gaps in the middle, you get a third pass rusher in here and a fourth pass rusher, a low-dollar fourth pass rusher, or you draft a guy. I can see the defense fitting within the personnel that Baltimore has trended towards the past few seasons themselves. And there's some Baltimore free agents who maybe are a direct part of that and come be a part of this with the Dolphins as well. The Dolphins had one more signing that came in, and it was the hit for the offseason blueprint. We're going to cover him next, as well as talk about where this team goes from here as they continue with the legal tampering period before the league calendar year officially opens on Wednesday. Stick with us. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is sponsored by BetterHelp. A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you choose to use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and to make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. Put one up on the board for the Miami Dolphins offseason blueprint. Aaron Brewer is signed as a member of the Miami Dolphins interior offensive line, presumably to be their next center. Brewer from the Tennessee Titans He's one of the smaller offensive linemen in the league, but he signs a 3-year, $21 million contract. And I grade him as an adequate level starter in this system. And remember, if you go back to Friday and Thursday last week, we talked about how I think the ceiling is there for him in this system to be a quality starter because of just how his skill set fits. Now, people who have watched absolutely 0 reps of Aaron Brewer, but Googled his name and searched his Pro Football Focus stats, have decided that this is a bad player to the Dolphins to add. Oh, too many pressures. He's not good in pass protection. Yeah. I fully expect Aaron Brewer in a timing-based offense to give up significantly less pressure considering the kind of threshold of like a half second longer for the Dolphins quarterback holding the ball is equivalent to the average time of the actual operations of the Titans quarterbacks last year. Those quarterbacks held the ball a long time. So yeah, a smaller center having to anchor for 3 seconds is probably going to put him under, and the entire offensive line, time under more tension, which is the opposite of what this Dolphins scheme is designed to do. And I think you look at the Titans in general last year, right? Brewer was the only returning starter from that unit. They remade the whole group last year, and it was bad. The quarterbacks last year in Tennessee had an 11.5% sack percentage. They were sacked. Quarterbacks were sacked 64 times. 64 times. Ryan Tannehill sacked on 12% of his dropbacks. Malik Willis sacked on 44% of his dropbacks on 4 sacks versus 5 attempts. And Will Levis was sacked 28 times on 255 attempts for a 10% sack rate. So 10, 12.2, and 44. So when you zoom out and you say, okay, what is he good at? It's the dynamic athleticism at the center position that made Connor Williams such a good fit. You're getting more of that. You're getting a player who comes to the team with more experience than center than Connor Williams had. I think Connor's a more powerful player. But I also expect Aaron Brewer to be a little bit more consistent with the snap dynamics as well. And they signed him on a 3-year, $21 million year contract. The same dollar amount that they paid Connor when Connor first got here. And the athleticism, guys, I'm telling you, it's the most athletic center in the league. The run game dynamics and the screen game dynamics are huge. Now, you'd like to think this team is going to add more layers and some true drop back 3-step and 5-step dropping into their offense this offseason. We'll see. I think you expect that to some degree. That's the next stage in evolution of the passing game. But as far as like the core pillars of like who we are and what we want to do and how we want to do it, this is an awesome fit. This is an awesome fit. And when you consider what some of these other interior offensive linemen were getting in free agency, I do have my free agent board here. Jonah Jackson, guard, could play center, got 3 years, 51 from the Rams. Kevin Dotson got 3 years, 48 from the Rams. Robert Hunt got 5 years, $100 million. Michael Onwenu got 3 years, $57 million. Lloyd Cushenberry, center, goes to Tennessee for 4 years, $50 million. That's what, 12.5 per on 4 years. Damian Lewis was a guy I had big-time eyes for Miami. He signed for 4 years, $53 million. Andre James got $8 million per. John Simpson got $9 million per from the Jets. Tyler Biadasz got $10 million per from the Commanders. And they just drafted a center like last year, but they made a coaching staff change. It's the intersection of value with the position, with the fit, that I'm really excited about that addition for Miami. I don't care what his PFF pressure grades are because I watched the tape, which is how you formulate the opinion. And you see how some of those pressures are coming and understand what he does well and how it fits within the Dolphins scheme versus where the shortcomings were and what this offense is going to do or try to be to avoid putting the same pressures on. It's a different story. Where this team looks from here, however, is a little bit of a strategy for the time being. Miami, as things currently stand, based on net free agents gained and lost that are qualifying free agents, are in a position to add 2 third-round compensatory picks for the losses of Robert Hunt and Christian Wilkins on $100 and $110 million contracts to the Panthers and Raiders, respectively. But it's all about net gains versus net losses. So you could sign a player to a $4 million, 2-year, $4 million deal, but if you don't have more losses that qualify as free agents in the compensatory formula, you will negate one of those losses of Robert Hunt or Christian Wilkins. So I think Miami's got to walk the tightrope here a little bit and ask, okay, how important is the compensatory picks versus the talent that's available versus the talent that's available that were players that were cut? So if the Dolphins end up having like Sean Elliott leave on a qualifying contract, or Raekwon Davis leave, then you open the door to say, okay, you can sign 1 or 2 more players, no questions asked, regardless of what their availability stems from. But until that happens, you're probably kind of leaning into, okay, who are players that were cut off their contracts that you can sign knowing that it's not going to impact the compensatory formula. And that would be players like whether it's Rayshon Jenkins at safety. Kind of heard it reported that there was some interest there. It could be Shaq Barrett as a pass rusher from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It could be Lawrence Guy, defensive lineman. If you want to swing for the fences and take your Christian Wilkins budget, because here's the perspective for you, perhaps, why the Dolphins made some of these hard decisions is Jonnu Smith, Aaron Brewer, and Jordyn Brooks, the AAV of those 3 players, is equal to the Robert Hunt contract by itself. That's why what happened yesterday happened. Because you have other pillars and cornerstones that you have chosen to prioritize, and you have other young players on rookie contracts that you are choosing to prepare to pay. And so you need to get a little bit of income redistribution to recreate more of a middle class on your roster. That's why what happened yesterday happened. Does it make it any less fun? No, of course not. It was not fun to sit here and watch players that we have fallen in love with that play for this team over the last 4 or 5 years walk out the door. I'm happy for them. I will always root for their successes, unless they're playing Miami. But that's why it happened. Eric Armstead. What's Eric Armstead's market? That was a bombshell player to get dropped the night before the illegal tampering period starts that was going to hit free agency. He's getting cut by the 49ers as a post-June 1st cut. Laken Tomlinson at guard is certainly a player to keep an eye on when you consider he's been healthy and been available, and he's been at his best in his NFL career in the Shanahan system. Those are players that have been cut off their contracts. Quandre Diggs is another one I've got big time eyes on. They need they need multiple safeties. Miami does. But Quandre Diggs, and if Kevin Byard's going to get 2 years, 15, I'd like to think you can get Diggs in the same kind of general stratosphere of AAV. It'd be a home run addition. Quandre Diggs with Javon Holland would be a home run signing that does not impact compensatory picks. So if you had to ask me right now who's the one player that was cut off their contract that you kind of have stars for, there's a gold star next to Quandre Diggs' name at safety. Now, I don't know that they're going to get that done, but it's where my eyes would be without knowing what other discussions for personnel are happening within the room right now. The Dolphins have not touched the Tyreek Hill or Bradley Chubb contracts, so if they need more cap space to facilitate more moves, be that via trade or otherwise, they could do it. That's where this team stands. And that is where we are after the first day of the legal tampering period. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins because it is your team every day. Fins up. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Keep your eyes peeled. More news is coming, and we will have it for you as it happens. Fins up.